So in this video, we're going to talk about Caryl Churchill's play Owners. So I don't know whether or not Caryl Churchill had read Erich Fromm's work in 1972 when this play premiered, and she definitely hadn't read To Have or To Be, which didn't come out until 1976. But basically, this play is concerned with the same kinds of ideas that Erich Fromm talks about in that book. The idea that property ownership and the ownership mentality is detrimental to the individual, to society, to social relations, interpersonal relations, etc., is really at the heart of this play. So basically, it's a story about a woman named Marion, who's a property developer in London. And she wants to acquire, early in the play, she's acquired through her associate, her employee, I guess, Worsley. She's acquired a particular building, and in one of the flats in that building lives Alec and his wife, Lisa. Sorry, I was thinking Louise, but it's Lisa. So Alec and Lisa, who had been Marion and her husband Clegg's friends back in the day, but they've had some sort of falling out and they haven't been in contact with each other for a while. The person that Marion wants to sell the building to wants the building tenantless. So Worsley, on behalf of Marion, is trying to get Lisa and Alec to move out. Lisa is initially reluctant to do so. Alec is largely indifferent to pretty much everything. We'll talk more about Alec because he's an interesting character. So as stuff goes on, Lisa becomes more convinced that they should sell and move. Marion becomes sort of more obsessed with Alec because apparently they had some sort of love affair in the past. And he was sort of the great love of her life, maybe. And so she becomes really obsessed with getting back together with him. And so when Lisa has her baby, Marion basically manipulates the situation so that Lisa signs over custody of the baby to Marion. And Marion refuses to give it back when Lisa and Alec want it back. So that's the basic plot. There's a lot of stuff going on here. One of them, and one of the particular models of ownership in the play is Clegg with his extraordinarily patriarchal conception of gender roles. Even though Marion is vastly more successful than he is, like she's running a flourishing property development firm, and at the beginning of the play we see Clegg losing his family butcher shop. So Marion is vastly more financially successful than Clegg is, but he still takes credit for that success because he views her as his property, more or less. So he has this like substantial ownership attitude toward women. And of course, the main way that manifests is with his wife, but it also crops up later in the play where we have this really vile scene where Lisa has basically come to Clegg. This is after the baby has been adopted by Marion and Clegg. basically Lisa comes to Clegg to try and convince him to get her baby back to her. And basically he extorts sex from her. And when she then sort of says, now I want my son, you've gotten what you wanted, now I get what I want. He says, well, we didn't actually specify that. Maybe if you keep having sex with me, I can fix it so that you can be his nurse or his nanny. And then basically he has this really disgusting bit at the end of this scene. He said, because Lisa goes to get up to try and go see her baby, and Clegg says, I didn't say you could get up. You won't be suitable unless you lie flat. Did you know that? Very feminine and do just as you're told. On your back and underneath is where I like to see a lady, and a man on top, right on top of the world, because I know what you ladies like. You like what I give you. I didn't say you mustn't move at all, but just in response. This is pretty fucked up, disgusting, patriarchal shit going on here. So that's one model of ownership in the play. The other major model comes from Marion. Because Marion, not only is she a property developer who wants to buy up properties and basically evict people from their homes, paying them the minimal amount that she needs to pay them to agree to leave, she's this sort of proto-Thatcherite, greed is good symbol of late capitalism. She has this line at the beginning of Act 1, Scene 5, and I think this is sort of characteristic of the late capitalist mentality. She says, I'm always hungry, but thin. I don't put on, nothing to show for it. So that idea of I constantly need to consume, but I'm never full. I mean, that's the capitalist mode. That's the late capitalist mode, right? I always need to produce goods, but I can never have produced enough. I can never sell enough. I can never buy enough. I can never make enough money. I constantly need to pursue money, but I can never have enough. I can never be satisfied. And so that idea becomes really, really central. And this... So, I mean, this is also connected to the other big component of Marion's character here. That is the taking of Lisa and Alec's baby through this adoption. Basically, Lisa, to clarify here, Lisa is basically in this sort of postpartum depression. She's very confused. She doesn't really understand what's going on when she signs the adoption papers. What ends up confronting Marion ultimately is that very failure of capitalism. And this is effectively symbolized by the attempt to get the baby. Because ultimately the baby is an attempt to get Alec back. So earlier in the play, Act 2, Scene 3, so that earlier than the part I'm about to talk about, not earlier than the I'm always hungry bit, but in Act 2, Scene 3, Marion has come to Alec and Lisa's flat while Lisa is out, she's trying to convince Alec to get back together with her. And basically he says it doesn't make any difference if we were together or not. And she says, not to you. To me it would make all the difference. And Alec says, I don't mind for myself the way you go on, but you won't get what you want. And I think that's a really, really revelatory line, because this is the objet a in Lacanian psychoanalysis. So basically the objet a is the thing that you pursue because you believe that that's what you want. The problem is that's not actually the thing that you want. What you want is desire itself. The experience of desire is what drives us as humans, what drives us as subjects. What we do is we fill in what's called an objet a, or an objet petit a, which is a small substitute for the experience of desire itself. And that desire ultimately is for an existential wholeness. It is for something that would fill the gap in our existence that, according to Lacan, is actually created by language itself, by being within what's called the symbolic order. But for our purposes in this play, this is Marion's existential failure to ever feel satisfied. Is represented by her hunger. It's represented by her need to be financially successful. It's represented by the number of affairs that she has. It's represented by her unfulfilled desire to have Alec back. And ultimately that's the point, is she thinks that the relationship with Alec will fulfill her. And she basically begs him to have a relationship with her. She promises him all of these things, and actually none of it motivates Alec. And I'll come back to Alec, because I want to talk about him specifically. But I want to finish this bit with Marion. Because ultimately the reason that Marion keeps the baby, and she doesn't want the baby, she doesn't really want a child. She has no interest in being a mother, etc., etc. Eventually, Alec... So Lisa has made several attempts to get the baby back. Alec finally sort of comes around, and he and Lisa go to Marion's office to meet with Marion and Clegg. And basically Alex, his level of commitment is the phrase, I should like him back. But he doesn't insist on it. So he says here, I should like him back. I can do without. And Marion says, I can't do without. He's my bit of you, not a bit of me. That doesn't matter. Not a bit of Clegg, thank God, but a bit of you. And then a little bit later she says, leave me if you like, but you won't get the baby. I will keep what's mine. The more you want it, the more it's worth keeping. But you can't just go like that. I haven't paid you to go. Every one of you thinks I will give in because I'm a woman, isn't it? I'm meant to be kind. I'm meant to understand a woman's feelings wanting her baby back. I don't. I won't. I can be as terrible as anyone. Soldiers have stuck swords through innocence. I can massacre too, into the furnace. Why shouldn't I be Genghis Khan? Empires only come by killing. I won't shrink. Not one of you loves me, but he shall grow up to say he does. So this is ultimately for me, the indictment of late capitalism is this idea that I can cause pain, I can cause violence, I can cause deprivation, I can establish control over people against their will, but I demand to be loved, and I will force people to love me. I will buy love if I have to. I own people, and because I own them, they must love me. It's very, very shallow, and desperate, and it's sad in a way, but it's also incredibly destructive. Like, this is what Erich Fromm calls the ownership mentality, or the having mentality. Not one of you loves me, but he shall grow up to say he does. The child's purpose is to love her. It's not to be his own person, not to have an actual relationship. His purpose is to fulfill her need. But we also have this bit, I will keep what's mine. The more you want it, the more it's worth keeping. So this idea of, I have to have things, not people, not relationships with people. But so Alec is the interesting one for me in the play, because Alec is the opposite of this. Alec is this very sort of Zen figure who very much has what Fromm calls a being mentality. Existence simply is enough for him. So we get the sense that he's gone through a pretty serious depression, and he's come out the other side with this really interesting, like, ability to strip objects of their transcendental significance. So what I mean by that is, like, at one point he tells Marion that he had this really intense desire to go see a beach with gray skies and sand. And so he went and he saw it, and she's like, and she thinks that what he's getting at is, I was disappointed by the ordinariness of it when I got there. But she misses his point, which is the ordinariness of it, the lack of a larger meaning, the fact that it simply is a beach with gray skies and sand. That's the beauty for him. The bare fact of its existence as such. It doesn't mean anything beyond itself. It doesn't contain a larger signification. It doesn't represent something. It simply is in itself. And so that's a really, really interesting thing. The last thing, very briefly, I want to say about this play, about Owners, there's a lot of black humor in it, and some of it I think is really, really amazing. So like Worsley, he's this weird character who's, again, a product of the capitalist system with its general production of anxiety and depression, etc., etc. But he's continually trying to kill himself, or at least ostensibly trying to kill himself. And he has this bit. He says, I saw a poster saying suicide, ring the Samaritans. And for those of you who don't know, the Samaritans were, or are, I don't know if they're still around. Probably they are. I don't live in the UK, so I'm not sure. They're a UK anti-suicide group. Possibly other charity work as well, but anti-suicide is the relevant thing here. I saw a poster saying, suicide, ring the Samaritans. So this very pleasant young fellow came round, and I told him I wanted to kill myself, and could he help? He said in a very feeling way he would certainly try. But does he? Hell, the bastard's always trying to stop me. So I think that's a good joke, even though it's dark.